My name is Peter Maguire. In 1997, I created and launched jazz clubs worldwide. The past year or so has been something of an existential crisis for the jazz scene worldwide. Upside or downside, it has, however, provided space and time for reflection. Jazz, My Life, is a non-sequential series of my own personal recollection and thoughts about my own lifelong immersion in the world of jazz. If you feel inclined to do so, please click on the subscribe button and the notification Saxman icon. Moss Side, Manchester, became the location of choice for a substantial number of first-generation Jamaican immigrants. Though recently I did find out that it was also, at a much earlier period, sort of 1920s, a place where African sailors would find lodgings. You have to remember that Salford Docks, which was a city on its own but associated with Manchester, there was a lot of ocean-going traffic came into there, and I presume when sailors needed a place to stay while they were in dock, for African sailors, Moss Side was a first choice. Two extraordinary places in Moss Side were Reno's and the Nile Club. They provided a safe space for what was a very vibrant local community. Also, you have to bear in mind that this period, it was really quite difficult sometimes for Jamaicans and perhaps people from Africa to actually get admission into clubs in central Manchester, which is obviously deplorable. But that was the case in the time. Well, Reno's and the Nile Club provided a space, their own space. There was music on there, dancing. People played dominoes. They played cards. It was a very favoured spot. Normally, it would open early evening and could open until, 4, 5, 6 in the morning. Also providing a place to drink after hours when the pubs closed. It was, of course, raided on numerous occasions by the police, but in fact it managed to stay open and thrived, in fact. Also, I remember the bandstand, which in fact had like a hitching rail on the front. I played there for a couple of years with a blue beat band. Now, blue beat was really the precursor to what is now called ska. Great dance music with a steady beat. It was great time. Later on, when the original owner died, in fact, it was taken over by new owners, and in fact, so I believe became an important place for house music and DJs, etc., etc. Well into the 1970s. The place was actually run by a guy called Sonny, who would appear always immaculately dressed in white tuxedo and kept a very beady eye on the place. Also, it would feature from time to time, well, fairly frequently, steel bands, of which there were numbers in the Moss Side area. I suspect the whole area is extremely different now than it was then. But in those days, Moss Side had a very, very vibrant culture and a very solid community and a level of safety, I think, which perhaps, sadly, because of the onset of the drug culture, doesn't exist today. I mean, there were actually, obviously, a certain amount of drugs floating around even at that time, though I don't think, to my knowledge anyway, the Nile and Reno's, it was mainly the aroma of cannabis that one caught. I don't really think there was very, very much in the way of hard drugs. It was also very favourable for jazz musicians, and many jazz musicians would go there and play with various bands, and jam sessions. It was a great place to be, a really great place to be. I mean, you could go there all night. It was amazing. Anyway, I mean, I had a remarkably good time over a couple of years playing there and made many friends amongst guys from Jamaica. Uh, Good musicians, not particularly into jazz, but certainly blue beat was their thing because people really like to dance. It's The place was demolished eventually. I'm not quite sure of the date because the building became unsafe apparently. And you have a curious situation now where in fact the site is actually being excavated or has been subject to excavation by archaeologists from Salford University who have been digging up the site and finding remnants of those golden days, beer bottles and ashtrays and various things. It's quite curious, really. A sad note, my friend Jackie Masricks, the late Jackie Masricks, journalist, jazz critic and musician, at that time was working on The Guardian in London, and on one particular evening, I'm not sure how the news came in those days because it was pre-IT, so a time of typewriters and ticker tapes and this, that and the other. And he played frequently at the Nile or Reno's when he was a student at Manchester University. Anyway, he was on working on the sports desk where he was a sub, doing a night shift. And all of a sudden, tick, 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 he saw the news on the ticker that in fact Sonny, who'd been the maître d'hôte and the kind of patron of these two clubs, in fact had been murdered. Apparently some dispute over gambling, but something of a shock suddenly to get news about the murder of somebody he knew well.